Hey guys, City Walk, City Wall here, and welcome back to Kobayashi Island. This is going to be an interesting episode, I think. The goal here was to get a good amount of forestry industry and this mining town done so that I could be finished sort of with all the raw materials that the city needs. And it's the first time in the series that I'm really building anything that's secluded, away from the city, up in the hills, so that's kind of cool. I actually had a really great time making this episode, as you can tell by the length of the episode. You'll see it was a really unique build, really some picturesque stuff, a lot of elevation changes and putting things in weird places, and it just felt like a really awesome addition to the island. So this was a fun one for sure. First thing I'm doing here, which I really should have done when I made the mountain pass, is I'm setting up right now the parallel line tool in order to create highway barriers through the center and on the sides of this mountain pass road. It's cool. I'm using the single-sided barrier on one side, the two-sided barrier in the middle, and then the single-sided barrier on the far side, but in the other direction so that it faces inward. It took a second to get the spacing and the directions right so that the barriers were facing the right way and were the right distances. But once I did that, it was really quick to get this going on through the whole highway. And it's probably one of the things that I should have done when I made the highway. But it's something I always do, or always try to do, just because the vanilla highways in this game, when there's no barriers between the directions, it always rubs me the wrong way. So I try to do it manually. Next thing I did was delete some trees, flatten out some land, and make a highway off-ramp off this mountain pass for this first forestry area. This is going to be the spot where the trees actually grow, and what I ended up doing, which I've done before on other maps, is in the industry DLCs, there's sort of sapling buildings that produce raw forestry material. And it looks like mounds of dirt and rows of little baby trees, so I placed down those all over this whole area, and then used the prop line tool to plant rows and rows of my own full-grown trees over the mounds. I think this is a little nifty kind of trick because the forestry industry, the forest trees, there's not very much choice. So getting to plant your own really makes it so that the trees blend into your pre-existing forest, which looks more natural. It also kind of ensures that there's enough trees around so that the buildings don't complain that they don't have enough resources, which is kind of weird that they, don't let you build trees on top of it in the vanilla game, but then require trees near it. I don't know how. It's a weird thing. So put all those trees down, put the main forestry building here, some raw material storage. I did that same thing that I did last episode where I duplicated a few of these buildings, the storage buildings, on top of each other, just so that I could have more storage in a smaller space. This area isn't really a very good road network. It's just a single lane in each direction, so the only way I'm really able to do this is because I have the Industries Rebalance mod, which, among other things, makes it so that the industry trucks are able to carry more goods, so there's fewer trucks overall. So putting more buildings in a small area doesn't really create complete gridlock, So, if I didn't have this mod, it would definitely be an issue with some traffic in these areas. Next thing I worked on after this was I made a second freeway off-ramp further along the mountain pass, kind of closer to the city. And I was thinking this is a bit more like of a truck stop or something, like fill up gas as you're leaving the city or something like that. There's a gas station, car dealership, and then I put down these paper or mulch or whatever they are factories. They're like wood processing buildings, and to me they look like they could almost be a commercial building or something. So I put those next to the gas station and stuff right off the highway, so I could start processing some of this wood that I just started creating. And then up above that, tucked into these hills, I made a road that leads up from there and put some of these other forestry processing buildings. They kind of look a bit more like factories with smokestacks and pipes and tanks and all sorts of stuff. I figured it was the type of thing that maybe people wouldn't really want near them. You would want it in more of a secluded area, kind of hidden in like a little cut of the mountains up there. Pretty unsightly, you know. So I did that. I got some vanilla industry buildings and kind of clipped them together to make it look like one big factory as opposed to a few different buildings next to each other. And then made like a parking lot, guard entrance, stuff like that. So I think now these processing buildings that are here hopefully should be enough to deal with the raw forestry products that are getting produced. And hopefully this is it for the forestry in Kobayashi Island. So now this saga with the surface painter mod, it's still not over. If you recall, 2 episodes ago, everything that I painted down with the surface painter mod disappeared, and that's happened again this episode. To be honest, for me, it's like not even worth dealing with it at this point, even if it is my own fault for having the wrong thing subscribed. You know, like usually if there's an issue with the mod in this game, you know, maybe the game won't load up right, you'll get errors, something won't look right, it'll be very obvious, and you can just close everything, mess with what you're subscribed to, load it back up, and you're fine in like 10 minutes. But my feeling has sort of become, you know, with this mod, if it's going to cost me 2 hours of redoing all the painting I've done every single time something goes wrong, even if it's like my own fault for being dumb, it's really not worth it. There's other ways to achieve just painting surfaces without the mod. So what I've done is I've subscribed to like 20 or so of these 1x1, 2x2, goes all the way up to 12x12 gravel and ruin and pavement assets, and also the theme decals mod. And so this time around, instead of repainting everything with the surface painter, what I've done is I've repainted it all with a combination of these and also ploppable surfaces, so that, you know, can't ever disappear on me again. One of the things I did to make this a little bit easier, a little trick, I used the Find It mod. There's a little icon at the top right of every single thing that shows up in the Find It mod where you can add a custom tag. And so for these items, all these things together, I tagged them as with the word paint, so that if I type that, they would all come up together, which has been really helpful and made it quicker to do this. You know, doing it this way is slightly more time consuming and complicated because you need to use more assets, and sometimes you need to combine them with ploppable surfaces or network surfaces, and it also doesn't 100% look the same when you're zoomed out because, you know, maybe the decals, when you're zoomed all the way out, they kind of disappear a little bit because of the LOD distance. So that's a little annoying, but, you know, luckily I've been able to do a lot without the decals. But the upside is obviously, besides that I won't lose my work again, these surfaces actually allow you to have completely straight edges at any angle for like the edge of the pavement going to grass or something like that. So you can be much more precise about the shapes and the angles and where it changes from one type of surface to another. So I think in the long run, this is the better way to do it. I know like 300,000 people are subscribed to the Surface Painter mod or whatever, and I'm probably the odd one out who thinks it's terrible. But I don't know. That's just me. It's not worth my time. If you did open up the save game that I released last week, you might notice that I did that whole process on the version of the game that I released, just so that you wouldn't have any problems opening up the game. Because what happened to me was I attempted to open up the game on a new computer, and everything was, all the Surface Painter stuff was gone, and I was like, oh my god, I'm not gonna release something that has no surface painting. I'm just gonna do it all on. So what I did was I went through and did the surface painting on everything on my version of the game from this episode, and then once that was done, I went and started deleting everything to get it back to a point. I mean, I saved what I had here, obviously, but I made a duplicate, and that's what I released, and I went back through that and deleted everything that wasn't really around up until episode 8. Obviously, if you open it up, you'll be able to tell there's a good amount of exceptions where, like, the volcano is here, or a lot of the networks are still there, even though that was built much later than episode 8. So what I tried to do, rather than releasing a version of the save game that was 100% accurate to what was actually there during episode 8, I tried to make more of like a starter city of Kobayashi Island, where it's similar, like the stuff that's there is similar to how it was in episode 8, but a lot more of the infrastructure, the terraforming, the shapes of the land, the docks, the port, things like that are still here, so that in terms of how the city functions and the layout of it, it's more similar to what it actually ends up being. So, I just wanted to talk about that since I didn't really go into much detail last week when it got released. So, maybe it's a little bit clear my intentions of what got released if you were confused and you open it up. So what's going on here? I mentioned a while ago, I think in one of the rural episodes, how I wanted to do my own take, sort of a Japanese version of this place in Arizona called Jerome, which is basically like a mining town. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's up on this really steep hill where there's only one kind of main windy road back and forth that leads through it. And the whole town is just sort of along this road. It's really steep, and it's got this big mine. Before, when I was just like thinking about this place from memory, for some reason I kind of recalled that there was an entrance to an underground mine, like right in the middle of the city, with like a big mine entrance building and like a place where trains could pull up, carry cargo out from the mine. But when I was actually making this area and I looked it up on Google Maps, I don't really know where that idea came from. That's not really how the city or the town is set up. I guess I made it up, but I kind of thought that was a cool idea, even if it's not real or whatever, to make a city like this. So, it's just interesting. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, even though it's not 100% based off of that place or, any place necessarily. So the first thing I did was I made the cargo train station and connected that up to the train line that leads out from the port, and then put the industry's DLC like mining buildings right above that and covered those up with these huge vanilla boulders and these tunnel entrance assets, so that it would look like trucks leaving with ore from the buildings underneath would be coming out of a mine. And so those mining buildings are hidden, And what I ended up doing to deal with traffic, which I thought was really cool and sort of made things look more realistic, I think, was I made it so that the upper part of the mine, where the piles of ore and the mine entrance are only connected to the road that goes into the mine through a tunnel, which goes under the train track and pops up right by the spot where the cargo station is. This way, any trucks that are leaving with ore avoid driving on the main road in the town to get to that cargo station to export the goods to the harbor, or to the port, And I think it kind of looks better because it looks like a bunch of these ore dump trucks are driving in and out of the mine rather than driving around it through the town. So I, just finished that up here. Right now I'm starting to place down a little bit more of the buildings around the town. I downloaded a bunch of these really awesome, kind of more rural Japanese buildings recently at the suggestion of a few people in the comments here. So again, obviously thank you to everyone who's been commenting and helping out and giving suggestions along the way. It's been incredibly helpful and useful. Keep it up. In this town, I wanted to have a passenger train station. I've been talking about that for a long time, and I didn't remember that until after I'd already made this mine. So I was in a little bit of a pickle, and what I ended up doing, which I think actually turned out cooler and kind of more iconic looking than if I had done my original sort of thing that I was thinking, which was put the passenger train station right up along next to the cargo one. What I did was I put the passenger train station kind of across the main road on the other side, up on this like kind of big cliff, so that the rail line would have to cross over a bridge to get to the station on either side. The road that exits the town, that main road, kind of goes under one of those bridges, which I think looks really awesome. And I use these really amazing bridge assets that are part of the railway replacer mod. They're like stone arches, and they have two different types of pieces, one that's track with an arch underneath and one that's a track with just solid stone underneath. So I was able to use those both to kind of really make it feel like these bridge arches had some awesome lead ups to them going up and over stuff, and they're just really cool looking assets in general. The railway replacer mod's amazing. Never used it before this series, but it's awesome. What they're actually going over on either side of the far ends of the station is sort of the mouth of these two streams, these rivers. In City Skylines, it's not always super easy to get a realistic looking start to a river. I think the most realistic way to do it usually is to make a lake and sort of have a river that's sort of like an overflow exit to the lake, and that's kind of how it starts. But I didn't really have enough room to do that here, so I just sort of hid where the water comes from under a bunch of rocks, which doesn't 100% look super realistic. The rivers kind of start out of nowhere, but I think it does make this area look really epic, the way that it has these rivers coming down from the mountains on either side of the town. It kind of reminds me of that elf city in Lord of the Rings, if you've seen that. So personally, I kind of forgive it. I think this looks really awesome the way that it's here. In order to not have an overflow problem at the bottom of the hill where the water collects, what I did was I made a lake, and I put a water pump on the lake to soak up the excess water, and it was soaking up a little bit too much. So what I did was then I made another water source in the lake to kind of keep the water level consistent. So you obviously need extra landscaping tools, that mod, in order to make water sources like that. And the water pump I'll eventually end up hiding inside like maybe a dock or some sort of industrial building or something, so that you can't really see it. But I think overall this is a pretty effective way to control water flow in the game if you're not having the water lead into an ocean, using pumps to remove the excess water and then creating a water source afterwards if it's removing too much, just sort of level it out. As for these canyons, I wanted to use a lot more of these vanilla boulders, the ones that I used around the mine, so that it would sort of feel like it wasn't just a one-off boulder, like this was sort of boulder country over here, and that's kind of why there's a mine, like maybe there's some sort of mineral in the boulders. So these canyons have a bunch of rocks on either side, and I use a lot of these water-friendly rocks that Zardis made. Use those in the water up the hills and stuff, and really wanted to create some waterfalls and water features by holding up the water using the boulders, but that didn't really work because the boulders react really poorly with the water, which is why those rock assets that Zardis made are so great, because they don't react at all. I did this one cool trick with the road that goes up and over the canyon, where I used a train track bridge from the Railway Replacer mod, a different type of bridge with kind of like trussing, and I clipped that together with the road to create sort of a road that's like a half road, half like railway trussing. I don't know. It was really a unique looking thing, I think, and to me it's so awesome, like seeing that lower road going over the bridge, and then just up above it there's a train bridge. I think it's all these bridges going over the canyon is really, really cool looking. As for the town, I wanted the style of it to feel pretty traditional Japanese, other than obviously the mine. I chose basically only buildings with those nice curved Japanese roofs, lots of little shops, lots of older style houses. I was kind of avoiding some of the houses that I was placing maybe in the more rural areas that are a little bit more modern looking. You know, even though compared to other stuff, I don't really like placing down low density residential neighborhoods because it's so time consuming. I really didn't mind it so much because this town is so unique and interesting to look at. All these houses are really nestled into different spots up and down the mountain. It was just kind of really fun and a little puzzle trying to fit them all in and at different slopes and stuff. Really fun to look at. One of the things that took a little finessing was this main ore industry building. I should have mentioned it earlier in the episode when I was actually building it, but I don't know what's the deal with that. That building has like a glitch or something where when you place it down, it looks a certain way and has a certain model. So like one building, and then next time you load up the game, it's like a totally different building and it looks different. It's a different model. I don't know if this happens to anyone else, but it's like bizarre. Every time I play in any map, it does this. So I placed it down, closed the game, opened it back up, and the second model, now that it looked different, I was able to do something cool. I think I sort of put it along the main road with a bunch of shops, and I think made it look sort of like maybe like a doctor's office or like retail shops, like a 2-story kind of retail shop place. You know, maybe they'd have like a nail salon or like a massage parlor or something in there. Put a little parking lot along with it. I like the way that I kind of really made it part of the town where it doesn't really look like an industrial building at all, which I think worked well rather than trying to hide it, you know, which I would normally do. So the last stuff I worked on in this area was this part of the town that's below the train track. I knew I wanted a gas station in this town because it's so remote and you don't want to run out of gas up there. So that's the building that's kind of furthest down the hill. Just has a little detail, a fence, and a grassy curb and some bushes. Next to that is a few shops, and then further up the road I decided I want to put an elementary school in this town. I feel like it's sort of realistic to have an elementary school. I also thought it would help land value, which isn't great since there's a bunch of industrial buildings in the center of town. So elementary school worked out pretty well. Put a playground along with it, and then the last thing I did to finish out was the houses that are right there nearby. You might notice I'm using a lot more greenery in this town, much more than usual in Kobayashi Island, especially these vanilla ground cover props from the Park Life DLC. I wanted this town to really feel like it was up in the mountains and the woods, so I didn't really make too many open grassy areas or backyards or anything that would really break up the forest too much. This is basically the furthest away part of the city, so I wanted it to feel pretty secluded and part of nature, you know? We're coming up here on the end of the episode. I just wanted to say this was such a fun one to make. So many unique and interesting things about this place. I ended up liking it so much. The goal of this episode was to just get the rest of the raw industry done so that I could go back to the harbor and finish out the unique factories there. But after this, I'm kind of getting distracted by this style of building, doing like a small town. So I may shift focus to one of these other small town areas in the next episode. Maybe do another little town, or the beach, along the beach, maybe. I am eager to see how much of these unique factories how much they're really going to be able to help the issue of getting goods to the island. So I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening next. Either way, hope you enjoyed this episode. I sure did. I gotta say, I think this has been one of my all-time favorites. That's it from me. City Walk, City Wall. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.